It was the year 1969, the summer of one of the most extraordinary events in human history, when man would take his first steps on the moon. On July 20th, Apollo 11 astronauts Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin made history, but what many don't know is that for a brief moment, they were almost stranded on the lunar surface forever. The world watched in awe as Armstrong descended the ladder of the lunar module Eagle, his famous words, "That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind," echoing across the globe. The moment was nothing short of a miracle, the culmination of years of sacrifice, blood, sweat, and tears. Yet, behind the glory of this moment lay a nearly forgotten story of disaster and fear. A story of how a simple malfunction, something so small that it could have easily been overlooked, came dangerously close to altering the course of history. Buzz Aldrin, the second man to set foot on the moon, had always been ready for the unexpected. He was trained to handle any challenge, every problem, and every disaster imaginable. But nothing, absolutely nothing, could prepare him for the panic that hit when the lunar module's engines failed to ignite as expected. This moment was more than just an obstacle. It was a life-threatening event that left them both staring into the abyss. When Armstrong and Aldrin set foot on the moon, the weight of history seemed to rest on their shoulders. The air was thin in the command module back on Earth, and the tension was palpable. The entire mission had to go off perfectly. The entire world held its breath as the astronauts ventured into the unknown, knowing that any mistake could lead to disastrous consequences. But the hardest part of their journey was yet to come. Aldrin recalls the tense silence between him and Armstrong after the first successful steps on the lunar surface. They performed their tasks, collecting samples, setting up experiments, and marking the lunar ground with the American flag. Yet they both knew they couldn't linger too long. The clock was ticking. The lunar module had to launch back into orbit for their rendezvous with Michael Collins, the astronaut waiting in the command module. Time was not a luxury they had, but the real challenge lay in ensuring the spacecraft's launch system worked as expected. As they began preparing to return to the lunar module, Aldrin made his way to the hatch. But what should have been a simple task, entering the spacecraft, became a moment of panic. The hatch didn't close. It was stuck.
Hey there. If you're enjoying the story so far, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss any of our exciting adventures. Now let's get back to the mystery.
In that brief, terrifying moment, Aldrin realized that they might be stuck on the moon. The thought echoed in his mind, growing louder with each passing second. What would happen if they couldn't get the hatch closed? How could they ever make it back? The quiet panic that set in was unlike anything he had experienced before. This wasn't just a technical glitch, this was life and death. Meanwhile, Neil Armstrong was inside the spacecraft, monitoring their systems, ready to begin the launch procedure. But with Aldrin outside struggling to fix the malfunction, Armstrong couldn't help but feel the weight of the situation. The lives of the two astronauts depended on fixing the hatch and getting the lunar module back off the surface of the moon. It was a critical moment, one that would define the rest of the mission. If they couldn't fix the hatch, the consequences were dire. They would be trapped on the moon, unable to return to Earth. The impact of this realization weighed heavily on both astronauts. It wasn't just a technical issue, it was an existential one. As the seconds turned into minutes, Aldrin's hands were shaking. The pressure of knowing that their lives hung in the balance brought a cold sweat to his brow. But just as panic began to rise, Aldrin found the source of the problem. The hatch had been misaligned, just slightly but enough to prevent it from closing properly. With a few quick adjustments, Aldrin managed to get the hatch back into place. The relief was instant yet fleeting. They weren't out of danger yet. The real test was ahead of them. The lunar module had to launch and the engines had to ignite without fail. With their hearts pounding in their chests, Armstrong and Aldrin climbed into the module, preparing for takeoff. They knew that failure was not an option. Every switch, every system, every action had to be perfect. As the countdown began, the tension inside the lunar module was almost unbearable. Aldrin looked at Armstrong and without saying a word, they both knew the stakes. It was now or never. The engines roared to life. For a moment, it seemed like nothing would happen. The seconds stretched out and Aldrin held his breath. Then the spacecraft lifted off the moon's surface. In that moment, a collective sigh of relief echoed through the lunar module. They were safe for now. But the story didn't end there. The rest of the mission, as everyone knows, went off without a hitch. They reunited with Michael Collins in orbit, and the three astronauts made their way back to Earth, where they were welcomed as heroes. Yet, the story of how they nearly didn't make it off the moon is a testament to the fragility of human achievement. For all the training, for all the preparation, for all the technology, there was a moment when it all came down to something as simple as a hatch not closing. It wasn't a catastrophic failure, but it was enough to remind the astronauts of just how close they had come to being stranded on the lunar surface. Buzz Aldrin, now a man who had not only walked on the moon but had also lived through one of the most terrifying moments in history, reflects on that experience with a mixture of gratitude and disbelief. "We were so close," he says, "but we made it." It's a reminder that no matter how far we reach, we are always vulnerable. And that's what makes every victory so precious. The Apollo 11 mission was a triumph of human ingenuity and determination. But the story of how Armstrong and Aldrin nearly became the first humans to die on the moon is a story that isn't often told. It's a reminder that even in the face of extraordinary achievement, there is always the potential for failure. And that's what makes the human spirit so remarkable: the ability to overcome adversity, to fight through the fear, and to make the impossible possible. The day they returned to Earth, as they stepped out of the command module and into the arms of their fellow astronauts and mission control team, there was no mention of the malfunction. No one spoke of the panic or the fear that had nearly overtaken them. But those who were there, those who understood the significance of every step they took, knew just how much had been at stake. The world celebrated the success of the mission, but for Aldrin and Armstrong, the victory was sweeter because they knew just how close they had come to being lost to the vastness of space. And in that, they had found not just triumph, but an even deeper respect for the fragility of life and the preciousness of every moment.